Thank you, Zelda. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interview Wednesdays. We're very glad you're with us today. It is June 23rd, 2021. For those people on Zoom, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please just enter them as soon as you think about them into the chat box. For those people watching on Facebook right now, please just enter your questions into the comment field. I am monitoring that feed, and I'll be sure to get those questions answered for you. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. I even made a change in this, so I'm having to reread this new because now your comments that show up in the chat box do not show up in the recording. So I had to go delete all that. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morse. Back in 2008, I started a website in the Dallas-Fort Worth area called careerdfw.org to help people with their job search by putting everything they needed to know in one place for a job search. In 2012, I started a second website called careerusa.org to help people outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. I have written a book. Mark, get that? You can write a book too one day. Mark, you can do it too. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s. I took it over in 2007, and I'll tell you about our upcoming program that's occurring this Friday at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team, and you'll hear more about that in just a few minutes. Well, when we started doing all this, I asked the two experts that I knew about interviewing to see what they could do about coming up with a program, because we're all stuck in the house. Nobody could go out. We were all afraid to talk to each other and see each other. So I asked Mark and Walt, what can you do? And they came up with a 13-part series. As you said, who knew there would be 20 hours of information to learn about interviewing. I guess we really should be giving out certificates at the end of this. If you've completed,
yeah, there you go.
If you've completed all 13 episodes, we should give you a certificate. So Mark and Walt, I'll let you introduce yourself. Mark, I'll let you go first.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm posting up my contact information. This is how to contact the pit crew and also my LinkedIn profile. So just as way of introduction, I had a long career in the telecommunications equipment industry. It's now called IT infrastructure. And it was a great career for the first 20 years or so. And then that recession in 2001 happened, and that really affected my industry much bigger than everybody else. I mean, after the recession was over, my industry kept declining. And so I was laid off 3 times between 2002 and 2012. And that was kind of the end of my career in telecommunications equipment. I then took a bridge job and then officially retired in May of 2018. So I've been down the path that many of you are on right now, and I apply all of that experience to my leadership of the practice interview team. So the practice interview team does just what it says it does. We offer you practice interviews. They're panel interviews. There's usually 3 interviewers. All the interviewers have been hiring managers, so we're professionals at selecting people to come to work for our companies. It's a very customized and personalized interview experience because you provide your resume and the job description. Okay, so it's not a generic thing at all. We give you a interview specifically focused on the job description that you provide and the background from your resume. So those interviews take about 45 minutes. The whole interview session, introduction, and questions and answers at the end takes about 1 hour and 15 minutes. And if you'd like to sign up for a practice interview, all you have to do is send an email to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, and we'll go to work setting up a practice interview. We use the Zoom technology. We do the interviews Monday through Friday on regular business hours. I'll need a couple of days to 2 to 3 days to set up your interview. That's 2 to 3 business days. And so when you send in your information, also include when you're available, +2 and +3 days. So about 85% of the time, the majority of the time, we can get those interviews set up in 2 days, but sometimes it takes 3 to get everybody's schedules lined up. So that's the pit crew. My slogan is practice early, practice often. So every time you practice, you're going to do better in your real interviews. And, just consider how much time you spend on your resume and on your LinkedIn profile versus how much time you spent practicing. Because, when you get in a stressful interview situation, what comes out of your mouth is often not what you thought you were going to say. And sometimes it can torpedo your results. So come and build your confidence and practice asking questions and building rapport and answering the questions that the interviewers throw at you. It's a great experience. And of course, as I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, I personally have had, been laid off 3 times, but everyone on the pit crew has had an experience with job transition. Many of them are currently in job transition. So it's a very empathetic group, trying to shorten your job search as much as we can. Now, what else you got for me, Jeff? The pit crew also does one-way interviews. There we go. So this is a bit different, but it's if you've had a one-way interview, then you'll know what I'm saying. It's a very different experience. Now, I'm sitting here in my home office talking to a computer basically, but I can see you guys on the other end. I can see your reactions. And of course, you're going to ask questions and things like that. But when you are talking to a computer, when nobody's on the other end, it's really a very different, surreal experience. So we have an opportunity for you to practice doing that with a tool, a professional tool that companies use. The name of the tool is called Easy Hire. Jeff arranged for it to be donated to us. And I'll give you the questions in advance and then a link, and you engage the tool. And so the 4 questions will be asked. You'll get a chance to answer them. You get 3 minutes for each answer. Once you're done, you'll get a link. And so you can go and look at your interview. I will never see it. Nobody really needs to touch anything once we get the process started. If you want to share that link with other people, you can, but that's up to you. If you want to share it with a coach, if you want to get some feedback from somebody in the pit crew, we can arrange for that. But otherwise, it's just a chance for you to practice this, interesting and I would say challenging tool, a one-way interview. And then finally, I do one other thing besides leading the pit crew related to job search. I coach on the question, why did you leave your last job? So if you've got a difficult situation in your past that causes you some angst and anxiety, something you can't get through with confidence and brevity, then let's have a conversation, and we'll storyboard how to answer the question, why did you leave your last position, or why did you leave this position back in 2016? But also storyboard any follow-up questions that your situation may generate. So I try to give you a comprehensive approach to how to answer this question so you can be confident. And the fact is if you answer that question very confidently, there won't be any follow-up questions. They'll be moving on to discuss how you can help them, as opposed to, why did you leave this job 4 or 5 years ago? Link in with me. My profile's in the chat window as well. And please send me a note. Yeah, please send me a note that says that we met on Interview Wednesdays. I'd just like to know where we made contact, and then I'll add you to my network, and that'll help you with your target companies and your informational interviewing. Wow.
Thank you, Mark. Walt.
Is that all?
That's it. Yeah. I ran out of things to say.
You got it covered.
How much time? We got about 5 minutes left?
Yeah, we got 5 minutes left. Okay. Walt Glass here, and I'm an interview success coach. I'm self-certified. There wasn't really a program out there for certifying for interview coaching, so I developed one myself. It took me 3 times to pass it, but I am now certified. If you would like to be a certified interview success coach, call me up. It's very expensive. I'll tell you, I took a lot out of my pocket, but nonetheless, I'd be glad to put you through that program. So what do? Well, I have a very informal learning interview success workshop. What are we focused on? We're going to focus on fundamentals. We're going to focus on what do we need to prepare prior to an interview. We've got some sessions on exactly that, number 1, and there's another one that goes more in detail for preparing generically and then preparing specifically. But the workshop practices the 11 basic categories of questions, their motives, options, strategies, structures, ways we might answer them depending on who's asking, what the question is, and where you are in the process. So it's a very informal. You will get a video of the interview. They average about 15 to 17 minutes. It's not long. And we'll go through and talk about how we can improve. And I'll give you some suggestions to really differentiate yourselves from those other candidates and how we go through that. So what do you need to prepare? Nothing, just come as you are. You can start from scratch. People tell me they're not ready yet. And I said, well, what's your plan to get ready? And there's a long pause. And so we'll come to the workshop. I will help you prepare a plan to get ready for a successful interview. Now do it very informally. It's not a mock interview. It's a learning interview. It's a time to sit down and learn. There's no need to squirm, no need to be stressful, no need to have to worry about making a mistake, because we don't make mistakes. We're just improving ourselves. That's all we're trying to do. Look at my LinkedIn page. The About section tells you all about the workshop, gives you that Yahoo email address to email me and say, when do you have some availability? I do it on Tuesdays, 10 to 12. And if more people sign up, then I schedule some additional workshops. I also have the Easy Hire. And so if you want to come practice or start learning the 11 basic questions, you want to practice those, you can do that with all the same things that Mark said also works for my section of practicing the 11 questions. So I'd be glad to have you come on down. It's not one of these things that you got to worry about. We just come have a good time and learn how to improve ourselves. There's no need to have stress. We can have learning without squirming.
Walt, thank you very, very much. All right, well, today is session number 8 of 13, asking questions in the interview. So gentlemen, take it away. Mark, you're muted if you're starting out. Mark, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I was having a lot of trouble getting Zoom reinitiated. Thanks.
Oh.
And yeah, it was hidden behind my chat window. It disappeared and then I couldn't find it. So there we go, a new way to mess things up.
Well, and you think after this is our 302nd workshop we've done, you think we have this figured out by now, but
yeah.
Computers.
Yeah. All right. Now let's see. Let's go back to the beginning. There we go, and put it into the right mode.
Nope, you're towards the end of your.
You got it? Oh, it went back to the end, huh?
You're back on slide 23.
How did it do that?
You scrolled up, but you didn't click on the first slide, so.
All right, finally. Okay, so wow. This is messed up. Okay, here, let's talk a little bit about put this into context. And today's session is all about asking questions during the interview. That's a very effective way to turn an interview from an interrogation into a conversation or dialogue. It can be used to build rapport, which we'll talk about in a separate session as well, how to, kind of questions you want to ask specifically. I think we mentioned them briefly this time, but it's such a powerful tool. And so few people do it, as far as I can tell. Now, in the pit crew, it's a little bit of a different situation because we're not really the team. So I have to believe that people ask questions during their real interviews more than they ask questions at the pit crew. But I'm not that confident that that's true. If you practice what actually happens in an interview, then you're not asking enough questions during the interview. You're just waiting till the interviewer gives you permission. And that's probably too late in the process. But let me back up for a second and say, here are the 13 sessions, and we are on session number 8 right now, asking questions. So if you look at the 13 sessions, and these are all available on the Career USA YouTube channel. So if there's a topic here that you really need to work on, then you can go look at the sessions that Walt and I did in January, February, and March. It's the same titles, the same information that's on this round, and you can look at that specific topic. So the way this is structured is the first 5 are all about preparing to interview. So if you're new to the job search, you want to focus on those 5. The second 5 are about effective interviewing, and we're right in the middle of that group of 5 asking questions. And then the last 3 are some special topics that build upon all the previous knowledge: target companies, informational interviewing, networking, and then how to deal with difficult interviewers and their questions, and avoiding interview crashes, or avoiding the mistakes that people commonly make. Even though they're aware of them, they still make them. So we'll go over specifically what those mistakes are and how to avoid them in the very last session. And then there's going to be a few, and then I guess this will take us through the end of July. Is that right, Jeff? Yep. And then there's going to be some guest speakers, and then we'll start over with a new series. All right. Now, the way this is going to go is Walt's going to start first. I usually start first, but Walt's going to start first, and then I'll be second. But before Walt gets started, I've learned this from Carol Brickell, who speaks on Thursday about resumes, and she's a professional educator, and I'm not. So I learned this from her. I want to give you a chance to put down in the chat window the questions that you may have about this topic, but also any questions about interviewing, and we'll try to get them answered today. If we run out of time, we'll note the questions and we'll reach out to you afterwards. But please go ahead right now, put into the chat window any questions you'd like to make sure that we cover during this session. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And I've got my notebook here. I'll jot them down. And we'll, if we don't cover them as we cover the material, then during our question and answer period, we'll have some pauses for questions. We'll get to them then as well.
You want questions about asking questions.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Walt, why don't you go ahead and take over sharing? Does everybody not have any questions about asking questions? Walt does. Why should we ask questions? All right, let's give it a, like 15 more seconds, and then we're going to get back to the program. If you could think of some questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat window. That's the best way to get them down so everyone can see them and we can see them as well. And we'll cover them during the breaks. So, all right, Walt, go ahead.
Well, here we go. In the interview, we really focused on answering questions. And now you tell me I got to ask questions too? I mean, my goodness, it's hard enough just answering. Why have I got to ask them? So why don't we talk a little bit about why we should ask questions? First of all, it's a two-way street. We would like to find out if we want to work there. So let's learn and confirm that there is a fit for the job, the company, the culture, the team, and the value, the achievements that we can bring, the things that we can help them do. So that would be one of the top things we do, because we should prepare a list that says, I want to find these things out. And so I'll have a list of questions, because that's important to us to figure out if it's a great place. And also it creates a conversation. Now, creating a conversation is really good because we can find out that information. But when you're going back and forth, it really reduces the stress and anxiety and pressure. And all, you're just under the gun answering question after question after question. And here you kind of relax and talk about things. And so that helps quite a bit and gets you into that conversational mode. And it engages the interviewer. So how much should we talk? And they talk? Well, about 70% for us and about 30% for them, somewhere in that area. So you don't want to take over the interview. You always want to stay on their agenda. It also demonstrates our breadth of knowledge and research. So we don't just ask questions to find out information. We lead questions with knowledge, saying, I saw this, and then I have a question about that, which demonstrates our research and the amount of effort and work that we've done to prepare for this interview. It really stands out as a strong differentiator. And it shows interest, enthusiasm, and builds rapport. We'll see a little bit about that. And it separates us from other candidates in a positive way. Not too many candidates ask questions. Mark really said, there's not a lot of people that ask questions. And so every time I give a practice interview, and we're recording it and going through the process, I say, now, we're not going to answer any questions here, because making waking up responses is not going to add to the purpose of what we're doing in the practice interview. But I would encourage you to ask questions. You get extra credit for asking questions as you go through, and then nobody asks a single question. And it just doesn't happen. And there's something mental that's just stopping us from doing that. So George Wright, I was fishing around the internet, and they had an interview with George. And so I cut out several of the comments that he made for various presentations. And he's right on track with what Mark and I talk about in interviewing. So what he says is, I asked to have any questions. So I asked this question because I want to see two things: how insightful they are. That means how much work we've done, research we've done, knowledge we have to see that what's going on, what's happening, and learn what's important to them. So when I ask questions, they are actually going to judge me by the questions that I ask. So it would be great if at the end of the interviewer says, you ask good questions. What's the definition of a good question? It means you're finding out the kind of information that you need to find out in order to make a good fit. And so we can control some things and do something with our questions as well and still stay on their agenda. So let's talk about guidelines in general about questions. So just to say, all right, what kind of questions? How should we treat this subject? Number one, prepare your prioritized list. We may not get to ask all our questions, so let's make sure the ones we do get to ask are at the top of the list, so we can find out what's the most important thing that you want to find out. Top 3, 4, or 5. So you research the job, the company, the people, the industry, competition, current news, everything that you can to help you gain knowledge about what's happening, what's going on in that industry, what's happening, what's going on in that company, what their culture is like. And you can include your areas where we demonstrate who we are, what we do, and how we help. Those 3 pillars of what companies are buying. For example, a person was asking a question, and he said, I was looking at your 10K. They were a public company. And in section 5, the management discussion and analysis, it says this. Another person said, and had a question about it. Another person, I was listening to your quarterly report earnings announcement, and your CEO was saying, what we need to do is to develop more products with a higher margin. The question was, what is it that the company's doing in order to achieve that specific objective? Now, why ask that question? Because this person is in product development. I can help you achieve that objective. So certain questions are going to be around the areas that we can help them. So like you take your achievements list, which build your old star stories. That's a whole nother topic in another session. But when we ask questions about those areas that they're having, what's going on, what's happening, what's the world like, then we can say, well, would you like me to tell you about a time when and then you give an R to address that specific problem. So you should have questions that lead into your star stories that's relevant to the position. Now, it's not really difficult to do, but it takes a while to prepare and do that. The hard part is the research part and doing the work to prepare. The easy part is getting inside, then having the questions and having that conversation going back and forth. Avoid the me questions. I put ourselves ahead of the employer because, I'm more interested in me than I am you, salary, health insurance, benefits, vacation, working hours, training, etc. Now, I know that Mark says, we ought to bring up salaries somewhere in the process, which is not a bad idea. Sometimes it might be better that we bring it up first before they bring it up. But somewhere, depending on who you're talking to and how many interviews you've had in the process, you may want to bring up the salary question at a point in time to say, we've gone far enough. Now it looks like everything's good, but I don't know if the salary's right. Now's the time to find out, because just like them, they don't want to go any further if the salary is not a match. And we got a whole nother session on salary stuff. One at a time, no double questions. You ever had a person ask a double question and you can't remember the other question, or you just ignore it? Or you ask them two questions at once and they don't remember the second question? I do this occasionally in the practice interview. I'll ask two questions. And when a person remembers the second question and answers them both, I am very impressed. That meant they are listening, they're paying attention. I mean, it's really is a strong differentiator. But we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that to them, because they probably won't answer one of them. Just go one at a time. Try your open-ended questions. Now, closed-ended questions, are for clarification. Did you say 25? Did you say 15? Did you say 50? Whatever it might be, to make sure. Questions for clarifying the question that they asked us. So that's okay. But when you're trying to get out information, for example, I suggest you don't say, why is this position open? Is it because somebody left, or is it a new position? Or, and we start giving them a multiple choice answer. Why don't you just ask them, why is this position open, and just leave it at that? And they can tell you why it's open. Multiple topics. Don't ask just questions in one area. Ask in multiple areas: the job, the company, product, services, future plans, objectives, industry, competition, etc. All right. And that demonstrates our genuine interest across multiple aspects of the company. So we're really finding out things, not just stuff in our area, not just the generic. We hear, I'm sure Mark would agree, that some of the questions we hear are probably repeated. There's only about 5 or 6 questions. We hear them all the time. You don't hear much outside those range of 5 or 6 questions. So we got to prepare something across the chain, and you want to, in your priority, you want to kind of spread that mix in your priority questions so that you're covering more than just one area. Personalize your questions. Could you share the reasons why you joined the company? Who, what, where, when are great. How can be also good if you're looking for specifics, but we want to discard why. Why is an interrogation question. Why did you do this? It's like Dragnet, if you remember Dragnet. I just think, just being in an interrogation room and why did you do this? Why did you do that? Try to jot why is just not a very good way to ask a question. How would you define the expectations? I see some information in the job description, but I'm interested in how would you define the expectations? Can you tell me a little bit about your career since joining the company? Those personalized questions. I know Mark likes that too. Don't wait until the end of the interview, right? Do you want to hear about a time when I gave this? Now, why would you start doing that? So if they're not asking you questions where you can tell your stories or you can demonstrate your expertise, pick a topic that or whenever they're talking about some particular topic, and within that topic, you might bring up. So, well, I've had an experience doing something like that. Would you like to hear about a time when I did this? Okay, and you give that that achievement, that result. And then they can choose whether they want to hear the story or not. But if you're not telling them, try to tell some by asking them relevant questions in the process around the topic that's under discussion. Always have questions when they ask if we have any questions. All right. So I was talking with a person, and he's been interviewing several, and in his interview chain, he's in distribution, warehouse management, all that sort of thing. And so he interviews with the CEO, but he's interviewed with, 6 or 8 people prior to getting to the CEO. So the CEO said, well, do you have any questions for me? He said, no, I think I've got pretty much everything, meaning I've learned all that information from all the other people. Now, you be the CEO. How would you feel if the candidate said, no, I don't have any questions? Wouldn't you like to know the CEO's perspective on things? Wouldn't you like to know that? Wouldn't you like to know those sort of things? And so that was a negative. And I feel like that's one of the reasons that he did not get hired at a couple of opportunities, because he did not have questions. And so we talked about it. And he said, I'm going to ask questions in the future. Make sure I do. Now, let's talk about dealing with recruiters. So there's a couple of areas about recruiters I'd like to cover here. So one of the things is, let's find out about our recruiters. So I'll call it due diligence on recruiters. Some people say, what was in my resume that interested you? That's not a bad question if that was the device or that was the information that they had. But if you leave it wide open, you can say, what information do you have that interested you in contacting me? All right. There may be something besides something in the resume. They may mention 2 or 3 things that occurred. They may mention a referral. They may mention that somebody knows you, and you can get all those answers just by opening up that question a little bit. What information do you have? Who are you? Are you a company recruiter? Are you contingency? Are you retained? You know, contingencies only get paid by placing people there. Are you retained? Are you the recruiting process outsourcing organization of Toyota? When they were hiring so many people when they moved here, brought in a whole slew of recruiters that they really was outsourced to hire all the people. I think they were trying to hire like 3,000 people, something like that, back a couple of summers ago. Who do you represent? I mean, what company is it? Recruiters sometimes try to keep everything close to the vest, and they don't want to tell you. They don't want them to go around you. That's the motive behind the question. So who do you represent? If you can get that information, great. Okay, well, can you, if they can't give you the specific, can you tell me what kind of company? Can you give me any information whatsoever? Right? Can you give me a job description? So what is their job specialty? Recruiters generally specialize in different job areas. Are they a specific person handling this type? And if they're not, then you say, well, do you know anyone in your area or someone else in your company or someone else in your recruiting firm that does handle this specific area? And where are you in the search process? So in general, they start out researching the position candidates. They do screening, then they present, the company makes a selection. And if it takes kind of a long time, I would say if you put months in the word phase, was one of the changes, Mark. If you put months in there, something's going on, something's happening. Recruiters can't tell you a lot of information about what's going on and what's happening. They are kind of limited based on the information from the company that they can share. Have you placed anyone in the company before? What a great question. Tell me about that company. What's their process? What's going on? Do you have a job description? So now we're talking about the position in the company. What do you know about the job, the company, the culture, leadership? What's their style? What's their hiring? What's their hiring process? I mean, how many interviews do they have? What kind of people are we talking to? Whatever information you can get. What are the qualifications of the ideal candidate? Now, some recruiters are simply what I would say basic searching for qualifications only. They don't know anything about the company, don't know anything about the job. They just have a list of questions. They call you up, they ask you questions, they copy down, report answers, and have somebody else make the decision. But then you have those who are very, very informative about the information. They work with the companies, that sort of thing. Find out that kind of stuff. That can really help you depend on where you want to go with getting help from a recruiter. Remember, recruiters are not out there to find a job for us. If you ever have that thought in your mind that you're going to tell a recruiter, here's my resume, here's what I'm looking for, and you think they're going to call back and give you potential job opportunities, that's not going to happen. That's extremely rare. So remember that about their job. Opening questions. So you get into the opening, and I suggest that we ask a couple of questions. These are probably some of the most important ones because since we're in a selling situation, we want to find out what they're buying. So here's a phrase. So you answer this first question and you say, now that I've told you something about myself, a little transition, and you ask one of these 2 questions. One of them is, how can I help you? anything that's along the lines of how can I help you? How will my performance be measured? What's the criteria in the performance appraisal? What are the specifics that I can do for you to say I've done an outstanding job in some time frame? Followed up by, okay, I've got those. And which ones are the most important? Which ones should I pay attention to first? And you get that answer, and then you say, okay, well, which one of those would you like to talk about first? And you can get into the discussion of all the areas that you can help them with. Very, very good way to do it. Soon thereafter, I think second, third, you don't ask the double question and say, what's the most important characteristics? What is it that a person has to do in this role to be successful in this role? So how can I help you? And who are you looking for? So how can I help you is the I help. Who you're looking for is the I am. What kind of person are you looking for? What kind? So you can measure culture fit, those kind of things. Closing questions. Now there's a whole series of things in a close. I'm just picking out the questions part of the close, not the whole close. That's again another session in openings and closings. So how would you compare me to the ideal candidate? Why wouldn't we want to ask, how do I compare to other candidates? You're the interviewer, and I ask you, how would I compare to other candidates? Are you going to tell me? Are you going to go ahead and say, well, we haven't interviewed everybody and we don't know? I mean, you're going to get blown off. I mean, they're not ready to answer that question, nor do you care in one sense, because you care about being the ideal candidate. And you're sending a message that says, I want to be the top candidate here, right? And if there's any gaps, maybe we get a chance to say, well, can we talk about those, see if we can remove any concerns. Find out the process for hiring from the get-go and update it as you go along. A series of interviews, who with, who's the decision maker. You know that sometimes the hiring manager is not the decision maker. HR makes the decision. HR determines the salary. It's not the hiring manager. But find out what you can find. Because many people say, I don't know when to call them back. Well, when you look at the next step, where you go to the next, who'll contact me and a follow-up. So if we're having this conversation and I said, all right, what happens next? Well, I hear back from this interview, and who will that be? And when should I expect to hear from them? And if I don't hear from them by that time, is it okay if I contact them and name the next business day? All right. Then you know when to call back. If you get a message when you call back, you do the same thing again. Give them a compliment, tell them something specific about what you liked in the interview, something different. And then say, and if I don't hear from you by this date, I'm going to call you again. All right. That way you can control your job search, not just interview, answer, hope they choose you. Who do I call if I have questions? You always want to have questions later, because that's the way you can stay top of mind, stay in touch. That's just a simple thing here, but it's there's an art to the thing that you would put in an email or a phone call, as to just, because you don't just call, so yeah, I have another question, here's the question. There's other things besides that. You want to build a little rapport, talk about the past, talk about maybe the future, talk about the excitement that you have, etc. Then you ask the question. And then the very next step. What is the next step? Now, I get that question a lot from people. What is the next step? But we got to get more than just what is the next step. We want to find out when it should be, where will it be, who will it be with. Update that information as you go along. They may not know until an interview is scheduled. When it's scheduled, you want to try to find out names of the people, the roles that they play, because we want to look them up. We might find out that they went to the same school that we did, something in common. Find out who you're talking to. Now, there's a document that I have that I'm going to drop in the chat window in a few minutes. And it's called 200 Questions Job Candidates May Ask Your Company. Now, you can search on that, look it up, but I will drop it in. But it's written a little differently. It's written to the interviewers saying, these are the kind of questions you need to be prepared to answer. Now, you can look up only about 1 million different questions that you can ask out on the internet. Questions you should ask, the top 14, the top 10, the top 24. There's a whole slew of them that are out there. And we're going to send you a couple of documents, including one that Mark's going to drop in the chat as well. This one's kind of interesting, and you can see the topics that are covered here that I'll put questions stars may ask. Well, that's kind of cool. I wonder what those are, because I'd like to be a star. So I will drop that into the chat window a little bit later. So when we ask questions, we want to determine that they are finding who we are, finding what we do, and finding how we can help them so that we're selling. Now we have to find out from them so that we can match it using the job description and our questions to help discern that type of information so we can demonstrate it. So we should have questions to demonstrate our interest in the position and the company. All right, so you ask questions about both. Show our drive to excel and the fact that we've done a lot of pertinent research. Strong differentiators. Take it away, Mark. Any questions out there? Can you address a voluntary gap question? Sure. You want to talk about that right quick, Mark, before we go ahead?
Mark, you're muted again.
Yeah, if you've got a brief answer, but we can hold it to the end as well.
Well, why don't we hold it to the end?
Okay. Here we go. I'm trying to drive this thing. There we go. There's Walt's slide. Okay. Now I've got a little bit to add to what Walt was talking about. And here we go. So Walt talked about asking questions at the beginning of the interview. It's part of what I call in the pit crew getting a good start. So I have listed my favorite questions there to ask. Right after you get to make your opening statement, which you will most of the time, 2/3 of the time at least, is when you should start asking these questions. And they'll come up later in the interview if you're asked a challenging question. And so I'm going to go over a few of the challenging questions out of the 64 toughest questions that interviewers ask. And that's my document that I distribute to, well, I mean, it's not mine, it's the document I like the most, so much so that I distribute to every candidate in the pit crew. Take a look at this document, and we'll go over a few of what I think are some of the best challenging questions and how to answer them. I'm also going to talk a bit about how you ask a question. So there's lots of questions you can look up. It's important how you ask them, and I was curious about this, direct versus indirect questions, because I'm a very direct, I would say, person. It's part of my personality. But asking indirect questions is much more effective in an interview situation. So we'll talk about that and the differences and different ways you can ask an indirect question. And then I already mentioned using effective questioning to respond to difficult interview questions. And then one slide on panel interviews and neutral questions for panel interviews. So that's what I'm going to cover in the next 10-15 minutes. Okay, so job descriptions are generally not reliable. We have a whole session on job descriptions, a whole presentation on those, and in general, they may not be new. They probably were not written by the current hiring manager. In big companies, they're difficult documents to get changed, so they don't get changed. And so one of the key things you want to do very early in the process is verify that what's in the job description is an accurate and current representation of their priorities. Now, the job description was a very timely document at some point, okay? And that might have been a few months ago, or it might have been a few years ago. So I think you can trust the document, but what you're trying to sort out is what are the most important priorities right now for this hiring manager or for this group of interviewers, right? So it's a question you can ask any interviewer. And here we go. I think Walt already gave you this one. What can I do for you in the next 6 to 9 months for you to say that I've done an outstanding job? Now, what I like about asking the question this way is you've included the phrase outstanding job. Okay. So you definitely want to do an outstanding job. So now you're asking, what would I have done, or what do I need to do an outstanding job? And then you want to ask in every case, however you decide to pursue this topic, your opening, the questions right after your opening statement, you want to ask follow-on questions. Okay, so this is not a one and done series of events. Now, and I talk about this in openings and closings the other session, but let me mention it here. It may become a little bit awkward, because you're in some sense taking over the interview, right? So you may want to ask permission. You may want to say, well, could I ask you a couple of questions? Or you may want to ask a very indirect question, which I'll talk about in the next slide. John, I'm really curious to know, of those that you listed, which do you want me to pay attention to first, or to help you with first? Okay, so about 2 or 3 questions here to sort out what their most important priorities are. And some people may try to put this off to say, well, I don't know, they just asked me to interview you. The hiring manager can tell you what the priorities are. And, then you can say, well, you're interviewing me for a purpose, and I'd like to know what your perspective is on, what it takes to be a big contributor here. So you can personalize those questions to draw out people's personalized response, because obviously they're going to give an assessment of your candidacy, whether they're the hiring manager or not. And so you want to find out what they think is important, so you can address it. I was wondering, so this is another way to ask an indirect question. I was wondering if you could tell me more about the most important priorities of this position. That's a good question. And, then the following questions. In addition to that, what else? Is there anything else do you see that's essential to success in this position? Just another ways to phrase these questions. And here's I'm curious to hear, what was it about my background that interested you the most? Okay, this is a good question to ask a recruiter when they call you. Now, Walt generalizes this even more, and let's just talk briefly about open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are really good questions. Okay, you'll get asked open-ended questions in your interview because you get to pick how the question is answered. And so you want to ask the interviewers the same kind of deal, and the same kinds of questions, so they can take the answer in the direction that's important to them. And so it's important how they answer that question. Now, Walt's version of this question is, I'm curious to hear, what have you learned about me, or what information do you have about me that interests you the most? So that's even more general. I ask about my background. What was it about my background? But they may, most interesting thing may be them is you got referred by the president of the company. So, that's a much more general question, and you can gain more information, possibly by asking an even more open-ended question. But this is a good one to ask recruiters, and they may tell you that you were referred by somebody else. The Walt's version is good too. A few things to avoid. In general, it's not a good idea to divert the start of the interview to get your questions answered. So here's a problem with the document I'm going to share with you, the 64 toughest questions. They recommend that when the interviewer asks you to make your opening statement, you suggest that, if they just answered a few questions first, you could be much more focused in this interview. And that's answering a question with a question. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that in Texas. I don't know where else you might want to do it. Maybe the East Coast is, more amenable to those kinds of, but here it's considered rude. Here it's just considered rude. So you answer the question, and this means your opening statement is going to be, I already covered this, but let me repeat it. This means your opening statement will be based on your research, okay? And then your first few questions will seek to update or prioritize that information, okay? So they're going to say, tell me about yourself, or let's go over your background, or let's review your resume. Don't review your resume. Make your opening statement. This is who I am. This is how I can help you. This is why I'm motivated to come to work here. We have that's covered in opens and closings, and follow up on how to make that opening statement. And then you start asking your clarifying questions, okay? And you may even ask permission, depending on how formal you think the interviewer is. You may even ask permission to ask those questions before you start asking those questions. And then there's going to be, 2 or 3 to sort out what their most important priority is, what it takes to be a successful candidate in this role, and anything else that's important, right? Yeah, now I say that, I got to give you a caveat, because in a couple of slides, I'm going to, talk about ways to divert an inappropriate question or a difficult question with a question. Okay, but in general, it's not a good idea to answer a question with a question. And don't ask questions about things you can find on their website or that a recruiter can answer, okay? So don't show up at the interview missing your opportunities to query the recruiter, okay, which Walt talked about, or missing your opportunity to do research. You just, how awkward can it be if you ask a question and they say, well, that's on the first page of our website, and that's the answer, So don't do that. You want to ask insightful questions. You want to do enough research that you can ask insightful questions. Okay, let's talk about direct versus indirect questions. And there's some time where you want to ask a direct question. Sometimes you want to ask just a yes or no question. And so I cover that in the best way to do that. Indirect questions, which is sometimes called a question in a question, is a more formal and polite way to ask for information or make a request. And you probably do this naturally anyway when you're asking something of a stranger or people you do not know well, and including your coworkers who you may not be friends with. And so they go something like this. Can you tell me what are the most important priorities of this position? Do you know? Do you know if? Do you know whether? That's for a yes/no question. Do you know if you'll be able to give me an answer by next Monday? Okay, that's a yes or a no question. It's a closed-ended question, but if there's some deadline, they may say, well, why do you ask, right? After you ask them, when you say, well, Monday, I have to respond to this offer I have. And so, you kind of need to make your decision by then, or I'm off the market, So do you know if, do you know whether, for yes, no questions? Would you mind sharing with me what your overtime policy is? Okay. Do you have any idea? Would it be possible? So these are questions in a question. They're a way to lead into your question. They're, like I said, they're a little more formal than just asking the, can I start on Thursday? A direct question, which is a yes/no answer. I was wondering, and I was curious to know or hear or understand. I really like these because the curiosity is a valued characteristic. So, and people, one time we had a candidate come through the pit crew. This is where I learned this, and several times during the interview, she asked this, I'm curious to understand, or I'm curious to know. And I thought it was a very effective way to ask in a question. So if you can throw in, I'm curious to know this, that, or the other thing, or hear or understand, how this role is important to the company, you can phrase the question. But that's a good lead in. I'm curious to know, and you can use, it's a good lead in question for right at the beginning as well. So. Now, here's one that you don't want to use, and sometimes you might use this with your friends. Is there a chance? Is there a chance that you could take me to the airport on Tuesday? And by the way, we're leaving at 5 a.m. So you don't want to use that really. It's a little too informal, even though a question in a question is a more formal way to ask question. This one is not a good, is there a chance that you'll make a decision by next Thursday? So that's really not the way to answer that question, or to ask that question. Okay, let's talk about some challenging questions. And when I'm done here, I'll post up this document, and there's the link to it. You guys can do a screen capture real quick if you want to beat me to it, but I'm also going to post it up. How to answer the 64 toughest interview questions. And as far as I can tell, this document's been around for a long time. There's no copyright mark on it. There's no attribution to who generated it, but it's a pretty helpful document. So here's one. The very first question in that document is, how do you answer, tell me about yourself? So tell me about yourself, and then followed immediately by questions seeking to understand their most important priorities. So this is, we've talked about this one extensively. Very important. I can't say enough about how important it is to start asking those questions right up front. Now, the fatal flaw question. Now, I put this one on here on this page because if you ask those questions, what's the most important thing for this position? What are the top characteristics of top performers in this role? How can I help you the most? You're going to be able to deal with some of these more difficult questions that may come up, like, it says in our job description that we need a master's degree, and you don't have a master's degree. Now, this may be all right with the hiring manager because the hiring manager has invited you in to interview, but it may not be all right with anyone else in the organization. And so now they're going to want to hear, you don't have, I don't know why Joe brought you in here. You don't have a master's degree. Okay, so now instead of saying, whatever you're going to say, you're going to go right to the most important priorities. Okay, match your qualifications to the most important priorities. Now there's a little bit more to it, and I want you to read the document. Go to question 18. Part of it is you can say, I've worked extra hard with other people who are master's qualified. I understand what it takes, and I've been successful, despite not having the degree. I have experience and abilities equivalent, right? So the answer is a little bit longer than this, but it's going to be informed by asking these first few questions right up front. What are the most important priorities? That'll make answering this question a lot easier. Okay, what changes would you make if you came on board? Now, occasionally you get asked this question, and I think it's more of a probing question, kind of to figure out how you think. And some interviewers will be curious about how you think. So you're going to be much more able to answer that question if you know what their top priorities are, and if you may have asked them up front, what are some of the big challenges that you believe I can help with? What was in my background where you think I can make the biggest impact? Okay, that's a good way to sort out if they've got some particular challenge that they're trying to solve. If you just ask the direct question, what are your challenges, or what, it's basically asking them what's going on wrong, or what's difficult for you. I don't think most interviewers, I know I wouldn't share that information with the candidate. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to hire the candidate. With the right candidate, the person I hire, I'm, the very first day, I'm going to tell them, okay, this is the biggest concern. This is where we need you to make the biggest impact. But unless you ask the question correctly, kind of non-confrontational, I'm not going to share that information. So you want to ask, an I-oriented, how can I help with your most, your toughest priorities, or something like that. What was it about my background that you believe can make the most impact here? Now that may or may not solicit a response to their problems, but it has a much better chance than asking a direct question. What are your challenges? What keeps you up at night? I don't like that question at all. Okay, I'm concerned that you don't have as much experience as we'd like in blank. Okay, so that's back to summarizing what their most important priorities. And, it may be that, relative to some of the other experiences you have, that's a little low on the list, but you definitely want to put the answer in the context of all the things that you bring to what they need, and that means you need to know what they need. Oops, went the wrong way. Okay, so here's another, so now we're kind of switching a little bit to a different topic, using effective questioning to respond to difficult questions. And so this is where you use a question to answer a question. And the silent treatment is not a question, but it is a question. It's kind of like, what else are you going to tell me? And often occurs after they may have asked you a challenging question, like, you know, you don't have a master's degree, you don't meet our basic requirements, then you may get the silent treatment. So now's the time for a question. Is there anything else I can add to that point, or even did I answer your question? And then for advanced students, would you like to hear about a time I did X, Y, and Z? So now you're going on to talk about a way you can help them out, and by offering to tell a story. We all talked about that. So, but here you go. That's how to deal with the silent treatment. How do you feel about working nights and weekends? Here's another one. I love the answer to this. It's kind of like that question, what does it take to be an outstanding performer? What is your norm for your best people here? That's asking a question with a question, answering a question with a question. What is the norm for your best people here? Okay, because you definitely want to be one of their best people. And so be curious to you know, do your best people, wait a minute, how many nights a week, how many weekends do they work? It's a good question. It's a good question to ask. Sell me this, whatever, stapler, pen, paper clip. So if you're a salesperson, you're going to get this question. And so now this is where questions can be used to discover what they want in their stapler or their pen or, you know, their paper clip. And salespeople know that have been trained to do this, you know, ask questions, find out what the client is buying. And so now you get a chance to work that out. If you're in sales, you know, don't skip this step. Be prepared for these off the wall, you know, sell them something by asking them good questions. Here's another one, the salary question. You know, one of the first things you can do after talking a little bit about your research is ask for the salary range of the position before you give your answer or in lieu of answering the question. And this is obviously more complicated than just this simple thing, but it's another example of how asking a question can move the ball forward without you actually answering the question. Okay, I want to share, do we have time? Yeah, we have time. So there's two questions here, and I'm going to actually switch over and I want to show you the document and talk about this, how to handle the illegal question. Okay, and one of the statements in that document is, remember that the illegal questions rise from fear that you won't perform. Okay, but let me bring this up just a second. I'm having trouble with figuring out how to share today, so here, let's try this. Can you see that? Question 55, the illegal question?
Yep, we got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, illegal questions include anything regarding your age, your children, or other dependents, your marital status, your maiden name, your religion, your political affiliation, big long list of illegal questions. So most interviewers know that they are not supposed to ask these questions, but here you go. You may encounter, usually on a second or third interview, a senior executive who doesn't interview much and forgets that they can't ask such questions. And sometimes these questions get asked just because they're trying to build rapport. Hey, you know, what do your kids play sports? Okay, that's kind of, you know, if your kids are big, my kids were big into soccer and my daughter was big into dance. And so I can see myself, you know, in a moment over a meal or something, asking a question, which is not really appropriate, but just curious about, you know, the kinds of activities that their kids in. And so that's kind of how it happens most of the time. So here's how you can handle this illegal question. You can assert your legal right not to answer. That would embarrass, it would be awkward. So not the best idea. You could just go ahead and answer the question straightforwardly if you feel the answer could help you. Okay. So if you happen to know that, like my children question, that if I've already shared with you the activities that my kids are in, you might, you know, want to volunteer yours as well. It's an opportunity to develop rapport. Here's an example, you know, where you could ask about your religious affiliations, and if you're, you know, active in your church and you happen to know that the interviewer is as well, then talking about your church, your religious affiliation could benefit you, so you can take that path. And then here's the best way, is to answer the concern behind the question. without answering the question itself. So this is probably the best way, right? Just to understand, intuit, what their concern is, and answer that question, not the question that they ask. Okay. Now right here it says, you can answer with a friendly, smiling question of your own on whether there's a concern that your age may affect your performance. Okay. I wouldn't be that direct, but here's a recommendation from this document. Okay. But really what you want to do is reassure the interviewer that there's nothing in this job that you can't do. Okay. In fact, your age and experience are the most important advantages you offer the employer, and give some reasons. And again, this is informed by the answers to those initial questions. What are your top priorities? What was in my background that you believe will make the biggest impact in this role? And then let's go to question 59 is also the opinion question. So one of the reasons I just started distributing this document is this is the only place I've seen where the opinion question is addressed, and how to answer the opinion question. And so it might be, what do you think about abortion, the president, the ruling party, Democrats or Republicans, the death penalty, other controversial subjects. Okay, now what they recommend in here is you kind of pull up a little bit and say, why do you ask? Okay, why do you ask? And that's down here at the bottom of the page. But it's a little more complicated than that, so I wanted to go over this. If you are ever uncomfortable with any question, right there in the middle of the page, asking a question in return is the greatest escape hatch ever invented. And really, you can ask questions really to change the subject, okay? It throws the onus back on the other person, sidetracks the discussion from going into an area of risk to you, and gives you a time to think of your answer, or even better, your next question. Okay. Now, what do you ask may disarm them, but they realize, probably shouldn't be discussing that over dinner with you, but it can also be very awkward. So you may have to fall back on eventually answering the question, or better yet, changing the subject, right? And you do that by feigning, I guess is the right word, disinterest. Okay, so, who's going to win the playoffs, right? So now you don't know who's going to win the basketball playoffs. And now you don't know what their affiliation is. So you really just want to feign, basketball is not my thing. Who do you think is going to win? Who's your favorite? So now you've reversed that and put it back on them. All right, let's see what else I got. I'm almost done. I'm going to switch back now. Neutral questions for panel interviews. So one of the things that happens in the pit crew is that inevitably, it happens almost every time, is there's usually 3 interviewers, and so the candidate will say, oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so now you've complimented the panelists that asked you that question, and the other interviewers, it's really kind of funny. The other panelists start keeping track of how many you got a good questions did they get, and in the end they'll report that to the candidate, and invariably somebody gets left out. So in a panel interview, you don't want to show any favoritism in any way. And so if you've got a question like you need to ask that very neutral. Okay, so it's really difficult in a panel interview to build rapport and to ask personalized questions until and unless you've figured out or already know in advance what their area of focus is. Okay, so until you know this person is a salesperson, or this person is the operations person, or this person is the accounting person, you shouldn't be directing your questions to any one person in particular. You just ask these neutral and not personalized questions. What do you think about? I'm curious to know. Okay, these are questions that can be answered by anybody. It's also telling and helpful to keep track of who answers those kinds of open-ended questions, and then you start to figure out what their area of expertise. Okay. You can also, one of the things I wanted to mention, and I'll mention it here, is that you can use your questions to control the course of the interview. So Walt mentioned this as well. If there's a story that you really want to tell, something that you think is germane, and it hasn't come up, you can go ahead and offer it, So what do you think about using agile techniques for sales forecasts? Okay, it's an interesting concept. Agile, if you guys don't know what Agile is, it's usually a way of developing software, okay? But it's much more general than that. And so here's this question. And if you've got some insight, experience, or if you've implemented this before very successfully, you may want to ask a leading question about that. And in the phrase of an academic kind of question, what do you think about using? And they may say, that's kind of curious. And they reverse that question on you. What do you know about that? And then you can tell your story. Okay, so now you've kind of influenced the direction of the interview by asking an insightful question. So would you like to hear about a time or would you like to hear about how I did X, Y, and Z, how I helped my company save a lot of money? These are ways to get an interview that's flagging going, or to change the direction of the interview by asking questions. Okay, I am done. Should you practice today? Yes, then sign up with the Pit Crew, reach out to his LinkedIn page and get registered for his interview success workshop. Both are good ways to get started. And I think, if you're a little nervous about a practice interview, go to Walt's class and he'll get you better prepared and more confident, and then you can come to the Pit Crew. And if you're thinking you shouldn't practice, then you need to rethink that because yes, you should, and you should practice more than once. We've had the record is 9 times. We talk about this pretty often. Jared Asplin practiced 9 times. So I can guarantee, at least I have some data that says if you practice 9 times, you will land. But he was determined to get a job in one particular area in the aviation industry. And I think one company, Lockheed, and they kept encouraging him. He had someone on the inside who says, we posted the job, you would be a good candidate. And so he practiced 9 times and eventually succeeded in landing that particular job that he wanted. So you can benefit from practicing more than once, and that's the story. More than once for the same position, for the same company even. A lot of people will come and practice for their initial round and then their second round and their third round. Or maybe they'll skip around and practice for their 4th, but you can come back and practice as many times as you like. We're always open and available to help.
And that's also, Mark, what you're saying is also a good idea too, that if you know that you're on your 2nd round or 3rd round, be sure to let Mark know that, so that when he sets up the interview, all the interviewers can sort of make the interview more realistic to, okay, well, we've already been here a couple times. Let me make sure that, they'll tailor the interview to be a little bit more effective. Well, the one question that was asked by Wayne was, can you address a voluntary gap? How do you do that?
Go ahead, Walt.
That was followed up by any gap, an involuntary gap too. So the question was a gap in general. So you want to start?
No.
Maybe, I think you'll answer it so well, I probably won't need to say a thing.
Well, is Wayne on right now? Because my question was, when was the gap? I mean, if you're just coming out of the gap, I think the best way to address that is right in your opening statement. Just say, I've been out of work due to COVID, or I was taking care of a aging parent, whenever you have a gap in employment, it's, and it was, kind of personal based, you need to be sure you indicate that it's resolved. Okay, that's in the past and it's resolved. You don't have to, say how it was resolved. They no longer, it's no longer something I need to participate in, and go from there. I often, I like to tell that story very briefly and then transition into something positive, something they're going to be interested in, to offer to tell them a story about how you solved something. It's not, it's really, what's really important is not really what happened in the past, as long as it's not going to affect your current performance. And once you've established that, then you can go on and offer a story to tell something that they're going to be interested in, some way you can help them that you have some insight about. Now, if it was in your past and you're just worried about how to tell that story, then that's what I coach about, and it's probably a discussion that we can't answer real briefly. We'll just have to understand what the situation is. Well,
I would say brevity is absolute here. If you ever want to be brief on something, this is the place to be brief. Do not give all the details, just give the specific thing. And you say, I was taking care of I was doing care for a relative, and then now that's ended, and I'm really excited to get back into the workplace. And so you stopped to do that, but now you really want to mention how interested you are in the job and you're excited to get back to work. Don't give them personal information. What's the motive behind the question on the gap? Well, one of them is, have you been in jail? Were you in prison or something like that? But most people are wanting to know that, what did you do during the gap? You might want to talk about that if they press for more information, to show that you took some courses, or you volunteered, you've done other things in the gap. Because another motive is, have you been sitting around watching TV, or what have you been doing, right? So that would be a good thing to mention in the gap, if that's one of the things. Now, if it was just taking care of a parent, you might still could add something to that to say, I haven't just been sitting on my butt doing nothing.
Great. All
Don't
right.
use
Well,
those words.
that was really the only question in the chat box.
Does anyone else have questions now that we're wrapped up?
This is Gary.
Hey,
Go ahead, Gary.
I have a question. Over the years, I've had panel interviews with 3 to 8, but I found that one person at least 40% of the time in the interview, and more often, if it's a 3 people interview, it's about 50%. That is the time spent and the questions asked by one person. You want to make direct eye contact. Excuse me. You want to make direct eye contact, but when it's sort of lopsided, what is your feeling about how much to spend with each person, eye contact wise?
Question is asked by one person, but you answer the question to all. So you give a sentence or two, look at the next person, give a sentence or two, look at the next person, give a sentence or two. You want to make sure you make contact with all of them, no matter who the question is. Those people feel left out if you don't make the contact with them. If you tell one of them, you say, that was a good question, and the other 2 people say, well, aren't my questions good? So you just make eye contact with each one and treat them all pretty much on equal basis, no matter who asked the question.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions before we go?
Well, I will tell you this, I had a very interesting question asked me in an interview when I was going through the process. And the question at the end was, we're here to evaluate you and find out about you and your background and stuff, and know something about you. So let me ask you, how would you evaluate each one of us? And there was 3 people on the panel. And so I was to come back and describe what I saw about the three. Fortunately, I blew them away. I mean, I was good at this. They were not good interviewers, but I was much more able to understand them and where they were coming from and all that sort of thing. But it was really a surprise question. But the lesson is that we should start evaluating our interviewers, right? Knowing something about them. Is this the team that we want to work with? If they're a team interview, is this the stuff that I want? So do that as well.
All right. Well,
So, well, let me ask kind of a rhetorical question, but so how many of you believe that answering the questions that you're asked, even if you answer them well, is all that it's going to take to get a job? Will that make you the top candidate?
Nope.
Not likely at all. I've had people that I've talked to in the pit crew who had this experience exactly. You know, I answered all the questions, but I didn't hear back. You know, I thought I answered all the questions well, but I didn't hear back. Okay, so that's not it. That's not the whole story. You know, you need to engage the interviewers and have a dialogue. Now, I also want to say, and I forgot to mention this, but you know, we often say, you know, have a conversation with the interviewer, and a few people get confused by that because, you know, a conversation's kind of, you know, you go out to coffee with somebody, you had a conversation, so it has really no direction, and when you run out of things to say, it's over. But an interview is an interview, so it's really more of a dialogue. You would like to get the interviewer to share information with you and not just ask you questions so you can just answer them, because that's not going to be successful. So, but you still have a purpose. Your purpose is to get hired. So I call it more of a dialogue as a conversation because it's time bound. So don't be confused about that phrase, you know, turn your interview into a conversation.
I use the word conversation as just talking back and forth, but a dialogue is to understand each other. That's the difference in just talking.
right. Question to Walt, what's the cost associated with your service?
$2,000, but I'm giving 100% discount.
And he's raising the price next week, so sign up today.
20% increase next month, so sign up now.
Yeah, I mean, what Mark does, what Walt does, I mean, it's all free. I mean, we're very lucky here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to have so many free resources by some really great people who we just want to help you. We want to see you succeed. And, you know, we think we've got the programs to be able to do it. So, you know, thanks to Mark and Walt for doing that.
I can't tell you this. I've done so many interviews, but for a while, I asked for a silent answer to how much do you think the workshop is worth? And the average came out to $200. So you're getting a $200 free. You can now take that vacation.
Right. Now, I don't know if you take Mark or Walt's the one-way video interview. I guess if you don't want it posted on YouTube, that could be another couple $1,000. But
right. Yeah, I'm thinking of bait and switch. Once you get a job, I think I'll send an invoice. You know, things like that.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Great information today, as always. Just as a reminder, we're putting Career DFW and Career USA is putting on training 5 days a week. Hopefully you'll join us for other sessions that are coming up. Let me get over to the right page here. So tomorrow we have a special guest speaker for Effective Resume Thursday, strategies to tailor your resume quickly. Andy Cook will be with us. You also have an opportunity to win a unlimited use of jobscan.co for a 1-month period. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting, what's going on in Richardson, Texas? John Jacobs is the Vice President for the Economic Development Board of the City of Richardson. If you have a target company in the City of Richardson, if you want to find out about a company in the City of Richardson, Texas, John knows all. He's been doing it for over 20 years. He's got contacts if you need help. He's very friendly. He wants to help you. I also have a list that he's given me, which we'll be distributing on Friday, of companies that have moved into the Richardson area that he's aware of and what's going on. So that list we'll be providing on Friday to those who attend. Next Monday, Effective Networking Mondays, or Networking Mondays, our talk is going to be by Jay Facero, Effective Networking. This is a pre-recorded video that he presented about 3 or 4 months ago. It's a great presentation. Jay's got a wonderful book. There isn't one thing in the book that I think any one of us disagree with, because he hits the nail right on the head. He's very analytical. He's an ex-CFO, so he is very process-oriented. Do this, do this, do this. Talking about practicing and everything. So please join us on Monday for a really great talk. It will be a little bit over an hour. It'll be about an hour and 15 minutes. So you won't, try to, if you do, please schedule your time to join us for that on Monday. And then for Tuesday, Locke Alderson will be with us to talk about how to use LinkedIn for job hunting, strategies that gets results. Next week, we'll be on session number 9, demonstrating enthusiasm and changing careers or industries. So those will be 2 great topics that we'll be talking about next Wednesday. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. Please follow us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. On the YouTube channel, it's the Career USA YouTube channel. If you don't pop into the playlist grouping, click where you see that red arrow that says playlist, and then don't click on the video down below, but click underneath where it says view full playlist, where you see the green arrow. And when you do that, up will come a list of all the events that are in that particular playlist. They should be in date order. If they're not most current date on top, click the sort button and it'll resort it so you get the most current session up on top. And you can go back and watch any of these anytime you want, and they will be there from here till YouTube goes off the air. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, please join the Career USA mailing list. You won't get spam, but what you will get is every day you will get the topic of the day, the title of the day, and the Zoom link, so you can join us. For those people that are watching on Facebook, or if you didn't get those 2 sessions to download, 2 handouts to download, you can always send me an email at interviewing@careerdfw.org, interviewing@careerdfw.org, and I will get that to you. Please note, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Walt's a volunteer, Mark's a volunteer, I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 13 years has been as a volunteer. I never gotten paid to do any of this. We survive on donations. It helps pay for Zoom. It helps pay for the web names, the web hostings, and the new business cards that we'll have to print with early practice often when we run through the business cards we currently have and get those all used up. Please consider making a donation when you get your next opportunity. So thank you for joining us today. Everybody have a great week, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, Friday, or one day next week.